Hey there, I'm James. Welcome to Game Stories, where we write games that tell stories. And in this episode, we are talking about genres of tabletop role-playing games. And by genres, I don't mean like fantasy, sci-fi, Old West. I don't mean that kind of genre, like the sort of thematic or setting genre that people often talk about. I mean kind of like the genres of the documents, like a novel is a genre, and poem is a genre, and tax return is a genre, right? I mean, like, what are the kinds of paper that you need to produce in order to have a functioning role-playing game? If you've been following the series so far and you've been doing the assignments, then in the last couple, I've given you some things to do that prepare you to write a open world system for tabletop role-playing game. You've done some world building, meaning you've imagined the kind of world that you want your game to take place in and the kinds of stories that have happened in that world leading up to the moment when players get involved. And then you've also done some thinking about the concrete details in the physical space of your gameplay area that would communicate the history of that world to players. So you've got everything, you've got all the stuff, all the raw ingredients you need to do some good environmental storytelling and to have some rich kind of interesting world for players to interact with. But now what? How do you bring that into a playable game? Well, that's what this video is about. And we're going to cover arguably four, different kinds of documents that role-playing games use in order to realize those visions for players, right? And they are a system of core rules. You need the rules of play so that players and the game master, if there is one, know what they're doing. You also need an adventure of some kind. And so we'll look at some adventure modules that are available or were available at some point for purchase so that you can run those for players with different systems. And then also with adventure modules, it's kind of like that, or a campaign book or a source book, kind of like the Star Wars book we looked at a couple episodes ago, where it kind of laid out all the kinds of information you would need to run a game in the Star Wars universe. We'll look at some examples of those too in different from different games. So adventure modules, core rules, and source books. We'll look at some examples of each of those just so you get a sense of what these things are, and then you can start thinking about which ones you're going to make for yourself. Okay, so let's start with systems, RPG systems, which are many and incredibly diverse. In fact, am I going to show you this? Yeah, let's try it. Boop. It's my planning for a different class. Let's go to RPG Geek and see if it's open. It's been down the past couple days. Yeah, great. Okay. So this is RPG Geek. It's a sister site to Board Game Geek. So Board Game Geek is like a database full of all of the board games in the world, and sort of a social media place where you can have a profile and talk about them. RPG Geek is like the same thing, but for role-playing games. You can see there's one for video games too. If you go to rpggeek.com and then hover over Browse and then select Categories, you'll get to this screen where you can pick different categories of things that they have in their database. The ones we're worried about today are core rules, adventure modules, and source books. But let's look at core rules right now, just so you can get a sense of how many of these are out there. If you're not really familiar with role-playing games, you probably have heard of like Dungeons and Dragons, maybe that's it. So it may be news to you that there's like hundreds and hundreds of different systems out there. In fact, 889 different systems, core rule systems listed on RPG Geek. And let's sort these by rank. Oh no, category's fine. Sort by rank, which means it's kind of the most popular and most widely regarded objects. And you'll see the new D&D stuff. D&D 5th edition is very popular, but so is this game called Fiasco, which I'm going to guess, unless you're kind of a role-playing nerd like me, then you haven't heard of it before. Call of Cthulhu 2 is we'll look at an adventure module from them. Star Wars: Edge of the Empire. I think if you start scrolling around on this, Apocalypse World you'll find things you've never heard of. And so you can click on any of these entries and go read more about them and read reviews and play sessions, and then go Google them elsewhere to see if you can buy them if you want. But we won't go too far down this rabbit hole right now. I just wanted to show you the site so you can get more info, and I also wanted to show you just the scope of how many different games are out there. And I guess the other point that I wanted to point out about this ranked list is that some things on this list are old for role-playing game systems, right? They've been around for 20, 30 years, 40 years, and are still going strong, right? Like D&D has been going since it's like the first role-playing game, and it's still the most popular with its new edition. But Fiasco and Apocalypse World kind of represent a different kind of tabletop role-playing game that's more narrative-driven than it is system-driven. And those new role-playing games are showing up here as popular too. Okay, let's get rid of this, and I'll get into some more detail about those different systems. This is the latest 20th anniversary Shadowrun core rulebook. This has all the rules that you need to play a campaign of Shadowrun, which is a role-playing game set in the near future where corporations have taken over the world, and there's sort of magic and elves and dwarves and orcs and stuff, but there's also super futuristic technology and sort of direct mind link hacking stuff that happens too. I think they have the original cover. Yeah, here's the original cover. So you can see it's all about shooting people and hacking into the Matrix and using magic, right? Cool. So for a world like this and a game like this is sort of a more classical style of role-playing game. A book like this, which is, can you see this? It's 378 pages of rules about how does this world work. And a game like Shadowrun or Dungeons & Dragons, to a lesser degree, is about making sure that anything that could happen in your game has rules for it, right? And it has sort of a mathematical model that you can apply to the dice system so that everything is kind of consistent and coherent. So let's just go through the table of contents real quick. I can show you the stuff that they're doing. There's sort of an intro, the basics, what is a role-playing game, and like what happens, what's a GM, and stuff like that. Then there's, can we blow this up? Yeah. There's a history lesson for the reality impaired. So this is like the rise of the megacorps and how the world became what it is in this role-playing game, right? So you get sort of a version of their history, which is in our future, mostly. And then a section called Life on the Edge, which is like, given the history and given the world that we're in, what are the day-to-day details of living in this world? What's it like to be, a computer hack that just has to earn a living in a world like this, taken over by the corporations? What's that like? All kinds of little details for that. And then sort of basic game concepts, how the dice work, how the dice system works, when you would use it, and how you sort of measure time inside a combat turn. A lot of games are like 6 or 10 second segments where you get to decide one action for your player or your character and then roll dice. I'm not sure what the combat time is in Shadowrun, but that's what that section of rules is doing. Basic introduction to things like techromancy and magic, skills and qualities. So basic game concepts that you'll need as you start building your character. The different, fantasy races that are present: dwarves, elves, humans, orcs, and trolls. And another edge is another kind of game concept, which we don't need to explain right now. Creating a Shadowrunner is a whole section about how to create your character, which is a pretty extensive section because there's a lot of things you need to know about your character and a lot of kind of stats to figure out based on the systems here. So are you going to be using magic? Are you going to be doing techromancy, meaning like futuristic hacking stuff? And if so, what are your subspecialties and what kind of numbers are you going to assign to those? Here's some sample characters. So if you wanted to, you could just sort of pull these and say, well, I'm going to be a smuggler and so-and-so is going to be a hacker. And you can just pull those out of the book, make a few tweaks, and get up and running a little faster. What else? different kind of skills you can assign to your character, and then more and more and more about these different kinds of skills and how they work. And then a whole section about combat rules. If you're going to fight non-player characters or each other, then what are the systems in place for making sure that works out? How do you roll dice? What numbers matter? What stats apply? Right? What modifiers? How different kinds of weapons work? Right? Like your projectile weapon types and your grenades and your rockets and your melee attacks. All that's covered here. How damage is applied. What happens if you surprise somebody? How does that matter in the system? What else? The Awakened World. Meaning, so this is a whole section about magic and how it works. What different spells there are. How those interact mechanically with the systems of the game. How they apply to dice rolls and stuff like that. Skipping over that. Then there's the wireless world, which is, how do you do the hacking stuff? What is the technology like, and how do you get into it to manipulate the world around you? What are the rules for that? What kind of skills can you have? And again, how do the numbers work in terms of the mathematical modeling that's happening in the game? What life is like for a runner, meaning a shadow runner, someone who gets into the matrix and manipulates stuff. So we have health, poisons, drugs, security systems, details about physical, technical, magical, and matrix security systems, depending on the kind of breaking and entering that you're doing in your mission. What kinds of resistance might you expect to encounter? And so on and so on and so on. Friends and foes. These are non-player characters you might run into. They're just kind of like the monsters in this world, or the enemies, the bad guys. This is information for the GM, so they can know how to set up an encounter with bad guys that's sort of fair for the party, right, of players. You don't want to have bad guys that are too powerful, or else players will be crushed and the game will be over. But you don't want to have them too weak, or it'll be too easy. So this is kind of like, what kinds of bad guys are there? Or even just non-player characters like contacts and allies, right? But how do you model their abilities and their combat potential? So all kinds of rules about that. And then, is this finally? I think this is, this is finally. Finally, a whole system about the kinds of gear that you might have, the kind of objects you would have. Encumbrance system means how much of this stuff can you carry? How much will it weigh you down? So you have to think about, I should throw away my, magic potion, but take this laser gun, for example. And then just details about all kinds of different objects you might use in the game world. So that's, almost 400 pages of rules and math and dice systems in order to make sure that this game world functions. So a game of Shadowrun might play like you want to, there's a corporate spy drone hovering over the alleyway and looking at you, and you decide, I'm going to scale this fire escape real quick and then leap out, and I'm going to slash at the drone with my katana, and it's going to be split in half, and then I'm going to be falling back to the alleyway, but I'm going to cast like a levitation spell beneath me to kind of hover, and then I won't take any fall damage. So the GM would say, okay. They're going to do a certain kind of stat check to see if you can get up the fire escape quickly enough. And so you got to roll for that to see if the drone escapes before you even get up there. Then there's another check to see if, as you're slashing at it, if you hit it or not. So maybe you miss and then you're falling. And then if you do hit it, then there's another kind of dice roll that happens to see how much damage did you do, and if you were able to split it in half, like you said, or if it was resilient and resisted you. And then there's sort of whatever checks happen to make sure that your spell can work and that it does what you want it to do. Otherwise, if it doesn't, there's further checks to see, how much damage are you going to take when you fall to the bottom of the alleyway. So it's sort of like, I want to do this, and then there's like math, dice. Here's the result, right? And then again, and that sort of repeats again and again. If that doesn't sound like fun, then you're maybe not super mathy like me. I mean, I am also not super mathy. Systems like this are pretty crunchy, meaning there's lots of things to think about, lots of details and numbers to keep in mind, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. But it does do this. Even if you don't like this system, there's reason to respect it, because you can introduce any kind of weird thing into this world and give it balanced stats, and it will function smoothly with the system, right? Because the system of dice and math is consistent. It's a consistent game feel and experience across everything, right? So you can model realistically, more or less realistically, all kinds of weird fantasy things without it feeling broken, right? Okay, so that's Shadowrun. That's a more kind of classical RPG that's very rules heavy and math heavy. So let me show you something that's completely opposite of that, which is The Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And this is a role-playing game that is more about narrative than it is about numbers. In fact, there are no dice, there's no stats, there's no rolling to see if you were able to accomplish X, Y, or Z. There's basically just you saying whatever you want, and then a system for players challenging you on that or complicating your plot for you. Baron Munchausen, if you don't know, is sort of a famous braggart who makes up all kinds of fantastic stories about himself and his accomplishments, and all of his stories sort of reflect his own greatness, right? Like he might go to the moon and save the moon people from some kind of weird problem that they have and come back heroic. So in the spirit of that, this game is about you telling stories about you. This book is not 400 pages long. This book, I think you can see here, if you look real close, is 26 pages long, including the covers. And let's skip to the end here. The basic rule system is summed up in Appendix B. Where is it at? Appendix 2. The rules in brief, 1 page. The rules here are 1 page. And basically the gist of them, I can give you in a couple seconds, are someone's going to give you a story prompt, and if they can't think of one if they can't think of one, then there's a whole 3 pages of them here in Appendix 1, like Baron, tell us of the time that the Venetian masked ball where no man but every woman recognized you. Or tell us of how you came to fight in a duel at the summit of the Matterhorn and how you survived the ensuing fall, right? So there's some kind of fantastical story prompt you're given, and you have to say, whoa, I was able to scale the mountain by this and this and this, and you make up really ridiculous, outlandish, braggart kind of story about how great you are and how amazing and fantastic your adventure was. And as you go, people can kind of challenge you, because everybody has a certain number of coins, and they can sort of put a coin forward and say, but Baron, didn't X, Y, or Z happen? Weren't you, didn't you have a broken arm? Or weren't you being pursued also by 100 goblins? Or weren't you in debt to the mayor of that town by 100 pounds or something? And the storyteller, you, as you're being challenged in this way, can either say, why yes, and you can take their coin and then add that to your story, or you can say, no, you're quite mistaken, and you can take one of your own coins and add it to the pot in the middle. And there's can kind of be a bidding war back and forth where you're saying like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true, or no, I'm pretty sure it's not true. And eventually someone will take all the currency in the middle, all the coins in the middle, and say, oh, okay, I was wrong. And if you're the storyteller that's taking all those coins, then you'll have to incorporate it into your story. Okay? And that's it. That's the whole system. Say whatever you want about your character and what you did. Make sure it's pompous and outlandish and fantastill. And then either accept or reject any challenges based on the kind of currency that you have available. And then take about 5 minutes to tell your story, and then pass to the next player, and they tell some kind of story. And everybody's trying to outdo each other to tell, the most ridiculous story that they can. It's not like a game you can win necessarily, because it's just the goal of a game like this is just to tell funny, interesting stories, right? So these two systems, between Baron Munchausen and Shadowrun, you have almost like two ends of a spectrum. One being like make sure there's a mathematical model for everything so that we have a consistent game world that is realistically represented. Everything from like how toothpaste affects your dental health to like how a grenade, might affect the physical structure of a room that it blows up in. I'm exaggerating a little bit there. All the way to Munchausen, which is like, let's just not have rules for anything. Let's just tell cool stories and add a little bit of spice to it by having this currency that goes back and forth between players so they can challenge each other on their stories. So role-playing games this is one spectrum to draw for role-playing games. If it's rules heavy or rules light, and system heavy or sort of fiction heavy. They both create stories, right? But Shadowrun and games like that, or on that end of the spectrum, are kind of more interested in the rules and making sure things are consistent and fair. And games on the Munchausen end of the spectrum are more interested in, let's tell a cool story and worry about the rules, if any, later, right? Okay, so different kinds of systems. In a future video, I will look in more depth at a couple different systems that you can kind of hack for your own purposes. But feel free to go to RPG Geek or look at those two games I just talked about, or even develop your own set of rules that is appropriate to the kinds of stories you want to tell in your world. All right. Okay, that's systems. There's a lot out there, a great variety, and it's kind of up to you to think about what's the right kind of system, more narrative heavy, more rules heavy, for the kinds of stories and game experience I want my players to have in my world. Okay, second genre or second kind of document in role-playing games would be an adventure module. And we've kind of looked at actually two of these over the course of this series. Early on, I talked about Tunnels and Trolls solitaire adventure called Buffalo Castle, where you're like wandering through this castle and weird stuff is happening to you. We also, in just recently, we looked at, right in just the last video, I think, we looked at Deep Carbon Observatory, which was a great example of environmental storytelling. You'll remember it had maps with numbers on it and then passages that describe those areas with interesting details, right? So players could wander through that world kind of at will and encounter those different locations, and then the game master would have something to say about them. So that's enough to know about how adventures work, but I'll just show you a couple other examples just for fun. This one is Warhammer, from the Warhammer role-playing game, Power Behind the Throne by Carl Sargent. And it's a city-based adventure, so it's not about wandering the countryside or digging through a dungeon and killing things and taking their stuff. This is much more about being in a city and being involved in the political wranglings that happen in this city. There's I won't spoil too much of the plot for you here, but some bad things are happening in the politics of this town. There's sort of a new tax that unfairly targets, I think, like elves and dwarves or something, or magic users. And that's part of a plot of this evil cult that's trying to take over the city. And if it goes and if it works, then they'll be able to like have all this power, and this land will be in bad hands for a long time. So the characters, and also at the same time, there's this big carnival going on in the town. So this huge festival, all kinds of weird games and festivities and drunkenness and noise and music. And the characters are coming to check this out. The players are coming to see what this festival is all about, and they're sort of going along the bridge and getting into the town. And then they sort of slowly encounter people who are talking about, this new tax code, blah, 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 or, hey, this rumor, did you hear this about so-and-so? And yeah, I heard that guy's part of an evil cult. Slowly they start having interactions or overhearing conversations where they start piecing together that there's some kind of conspiracy happening to take over the town. And then most of the gameplay is about kind of rising in levels of influence to unravel this evil plot. So you'll encounter some kind of courtier and who is, plays an important role in this thing. But in order to save them or get them or change their minds, you have to kind of resolve some other kind of thing. Like I think one of them is a drug addict of some kind, and their dealer is one of the evil people. And so you have to resolve that system. You have to resolve that problem somehow in order to advance to the next rank and influence other people in the court, and eventually do away with the power behind the throne, right? So there's a lot of, I think this is a good example or a good adventure to look at, to think about, if I want to do kind of political negotiations and political scheming and dealing, like if you wanted to make like a, House of Cards kind of role-playing game, this is a good example to look at, because there's not a lot of sword play necessarily. There can be, or fighting, but there is a whole lot of like negotiation and blackmailing and leverage manipulation and political wrangling, right? This adventure is much more about that than it is about going out and slaying a dragon. So, interesting one to look at. Power behind the throne. Another one that's worth looking at. Where did it go? Oh yeah, we gotta zoom up for this. Here, did I do it? No. The Masks of Nyarlathotep, I think I'm saying that right, for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. Nyarlathotep, that's my best guess. Call of Cthulhu role-playing game is one that's about mysteries, and mysteries set in the world of H.P. Lovecraft and his sort of weird monster stuff. So basically, in an adventure like this, you can expect that there's some kind of cultists trying to unleash unspeakable, unknowable evil on the world, and the players are investigators trying to solve the mystery of what's happening and then intervene so that unspeakable evil is not unleashed upon the world. And this adventure is noteworthy because it is so open, or it has such a great open feeling, right? You can look at the table of contents here and see that the first adventure takes place in New York, and so you'll have an encounter there. But then the adventures could end up in London, Cairo, Kenya, Australia, Shanghai, right? There's all these cities and locations all over the world. Let's see, they got a map? Yeah, here. And these locations can be traveled to in any order. So in each encounter, like in New York, let's scroll down to New York. First, the book starts with a summary of events for the game master, the person who's going to be running the campaign, to give them all of the spoilers, right? So don't read this too closely. All the spoilers about everything that happened and the plot and who's involved and how. So that, because they're kind of controlling the mystery, they need to know what has happened, so what kind of clues might be revealed by player actions. So you get all that information in your head. And then some different characters they might run into and what kinds of information they might have. We need to get down to New York. How are we going to get there? Is this going to do it? Yeah, New York. Okay. So in New York, it starts out with you getting a telegram from this guy, Jackson Elias. And he is sort of a reporter, author, world traveler who investigates evil cults. So handy guy to know. And it begins with this telegraph. One of the neat features of this adventure is that there's a bunch of player handouts you can photocopy and hand to the players so they can actually be holding the telegraph and feel like something physical from the game world they're interacting with. So this is, the telegram. Have information concerning Carlisle expedition. Stop. Need reliable investigative team. Stop. Arrive January 15th. Stop. Signed, Jackson Elias. So the way this is going to work is the game master is going to say one of the players has a friend named Jackson Elias. Here's what he's all about. You get this telegram from him. You assemble your team and you go meet him. It turns out he's been horribly murdered. Can we see that? Yeah. He's been murdered and eviscerated in his hotel room. A weird symbol painted on his forehead. And so the adventure begins. The mystery begins. Let's zoom in on this. Each chapter also has like a bunch of clues that you get. So room 410 is where Carlisle was murdered. And as you investigate that scene, you're going to get a letter and a card and a matchbox and a photo of a yacht and another card and another letter and a handbill. And you're going to see the symbol on his forehead. And each of those clues, is going to lead to a different location. Like if you follow this lead, you're going to end up in Cairo. If you follow that one, you'll end up in London or Shanghai or somewhere else in New York. Or you'll go to this lecture by a Harvard researcher or this one by a Miskatonic University professor and so forth. So the play is structured around incidents clues that give you leads around the world. And often those clues, let's see, are in the form of other handouts. Let's see if we can see some of those. Yeah, so here's the Penhue Foundation card and the matchbox that you find. And here's a letter. And all these things will be handed to the players. Oh, you find this and you find this. So they can kind of read them and piece together for themselves where these leads might take them. Then they can end up anywhere in the world. They take, steamliners across the ocean and end up in Shanghai and then investigate something there and then get more handouts and more clues and then think through what's happening. And eventually they end up, hopefully, in the right spot with the right people to make sure that unspeakable evil is not unleashed upon the world. There are some problems with this with the Mask of Nyarlathotep adventure and with some of the other documents that I'm showing you today, which I'll cover in the next deep dive, I think. I'm going to talk about, representing foreign cultures and how to do that with some sensitivity and intelligence rather than doing it stereotypically. So I'll kind of show you how this adventure fails in that in some ways. But for right now, just know that the structure of the thing is cool and it's worth looking at for that, but also know the way that it models interactions with people from other cultures may be less desirable. Okay, that's some adventure modules. We've got, you've seen Tunnels and Trolls of Buffalo Castle. You've seen Deep Carbon Observatory. You've seen now Power Behind the Throne and the Masks of Nyarlathotep. These are structured differently. They have different kinds of plots. Nyarlathotep is structured around mystery and exploration. Power Behind the Throne is structured around political machinations and court politics. And Deep Carbon Observatory is modeled around exploration of a physical space and also like sort of adventure-y combat stuff, right? So, but they all have something in common, which is there's a clear goal, whether it's stop the evil or, I guess they're all kind of stop the evil, right? Explore and conquer and get stuff, or stop the evil political stuff, or stop the evil, the unspeakable evil that's being unleashed by cultists. There's a clear goal and clear obstacles that are in your way so that there's sort of an obvious narrative arc that can happen. An inciting incident gets you involved as sort of a plot hook, some kind of thing that gets you involved, like your friend has been murdered and you need to figure out what happened, or you hear rumors of political machinations, or there's a flood and all the damage and you need to figure out what you're going to do with all this stuff. There's a plot hook to get you involved, and then there's a series of challenges as you head toward a final goal, and then you achieve that final goal, hopefully, and the story's over. All right? So it's a module that creates a narrative within a game system. Okay, and those are worth writing, and the examples I've shown you are good ones to study for particular different kinds of adventures. Okay, so with rules, adventures, and then source books. We've already seen an example of this too. This is sort of the third genre. Source books is like that Star Wars book I showed you that had rules for all the different spaceships and rules for all the different alien races and stats for different powerful NPC characters that you might encounter. So that's what that is, but let me show you just a couple other examples too. What do we need? Oh yeah, this is Los Angeles by Night for the role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade, which is also a very narrative-focused game. Not super rules crunchy like Shadowrun, not super loose like Baron Munchausen, but more on the Baron Munchausen side than the Shadowrun side, or maybe somewhere in the middle. Anyway, this is basically LA, but with vampires in the mix. And it gives you all the details and information that you need in order to play games in this world. A source book like this is not going to give you an adventure. It's not going to give you a clear goal and a plot hook and challenges to meet and to get there. It's just going to give you, here's what's available. And so game masters can take this information and use it to construct their own adventures. So your party shows up in LA, you meet this guy, and you're gonna challenge some local vampire chief or something. I'm not getting that right. But it just, my point is that it gives you the details to construct your own adventures or to have a kind of sandbox style gameplay, which is a way of talking about kind of an unstructured campaign where it's player driven. Players kind of come to Los Angeles or wherever, or the Star Wars world, and kind of do whatever they want. And then the game master's job is to kind of on the fly come up with what are the consequences, or who do they meet, or what kinds of trouble might they get into based on what game master knows about the world. Okay. So we'll talk about Sandbox probably a little bit more. Anyway, LA at night. So the way this is structured is it's going to give you kind of some details about what this place is all about. The Big Orange, like the Big Apple. What is LA, right? What is the sort of vampire state of Los Angeles? Then a whole chapter on the history of how it got to be that way, beginning with the conquistadors and moving forward, because the first vampire came over with some conquistadors early on, and vampires lived for a long time, right? So you need to know the story of how early they were here and what they did. Geography is like maps of Southern California and places on the maps and things that you might encounter there, places that you might go, sort of like a travel guide to LA, but with vampires in it. The Damned is sort of it's descriptions of different vampire clans and groups, and also descriptions of individuals that players might encounter. So the different vampire people that they would encounter, or werewolves, and different kinds of folk that they would encounter. Then the political situation is the politics of anarchy. So in the anarch-free states, there isn't sort of a hierarchical vampire rule. Those people have been overthrown, and now it's kind of like do what you will vampirism instead of follow the boss vampirism. And then a little more follow-up information about that. So pure world building. This is like, when we did the world building video, I was like, what are the politics? How does gender work? What's the geography? How's the economy? I was asking a bunch of questions like that. This is a document that sort of takes all that information and makes it available to game masters, and I suppose players, in a way that is like accessible, right? It's not just a list of facts. It's like, let me present it for you so that you'll understand everything there is to know about vampires in LA, which is a lot. So what should we look at? I think that's really all you need to know. I kind of want to show you these maps, though. So there's all of California and the freeways you might take, right? Here's LA, the Barony of the Angels. You can go to the LA Zoo. You can go to the Barony of Pasadena. You can encounter all kinds of different weirdos along the way. A major vampire hotspot, A Taste of LA. You can go there. Club Zombie. So, and it talks about different locations that you might go to and what you might expect to find there, how vampires have interacted with the space, who's in charge of which areas in terms of vampires and stuff, or how loose the organization is in different places. Anyway, so if you want to have a set of adventure in Vampire Los Angeles, that is everything you ever need to know. And that's what a source book is supposed to provide, right? It's supposed to provide all the information you could possibly need to know about an area and about the people that are there and the politics and everything else, so that when you start doing things in that area, the game master knows how the world will respond, right? Or might be able to come up with a more sort of linear focused adventure inside that world. Okay, one more example of a source book, and then that'll be it for this episode. So this is Red Tide by, I think, Chris Crawford. Is that the guy's name? Kevin Crawford, sorry. And this is an original fantasy environment. And the sort of backstory of this world is that there was this weird red mist that started spreading all over the planet. And inside the mist were demon hordes from another dimension that destroyed everything in their wake. So this mist would sort of come ashore from the ocean and then sweep over a continent and destroy everyone and everything. There was one kind of wizard guy who knew this was coming and knew there was this one little island, sort of archipelago, that would be safe from the red mist. And he sort of gathered a bunch of people together and took them there. So this is the last place in the world that is not been consumed by demons from another dimension is these islands, right? And so this book is organized around how do you have an adventure in this setting? What sort of politics and situations are there, and what sort of creatures and people are there? What's the history of the place, and how might you interact with it? So Rising Tide and Crimson Past are chapters devoted to kind of the backstory I just told you. People of the Isles talks about who's there. And there's a whole, so this is, I guess the piece that I'll talk about this in a later video is the wizard who came here with all these people to these islands found that it was not uninhabited and then proceeded to commit genocide basically against the local inhabitants. So this land is built many years forward in the future on that history. And we'll talk about how well it's represented and how well maybe some mistakes that it makes in another video. Why is this one important? Oh, okay. So, the setting is interesting, and it goes through the history and politics and economies and different locations and different kinds of people and their cultures and what they're like and why they're there and what would it be like for a player to be one of them. It does all that world building stuff that you need a source book to do. On top of that, so here's maps and stuff, and so what kind of geography and what kind of random encounters you might have, what kinds of creatures are out there that you might run into randomly as you're wandering around. Different versions of the same map, little drawings of towns and how they're working. You can see there's wind power for harvesting or grinding grain. More topographical versions of the map. Current state of the political climate, right? This is the Shu lands. We'll probably cover this in more detail later, but this is sort of the native populace, the First Nations people that were there first. These are the sort of colonialist kingdoms that are set up on this side of the island. So it gives you maps of all that and then details of each of them. The real interesting value in a book like this is the sandbox tools that it gives you, and I'm trying to get down to them as I talk. Here's some stats for the different kinds of baddies that you might run into. If you have run into a tide spawn creeper, what's its alignment, how much damage does it do, how fast can it move, and so forth. How much experience do you get for killing it? Okay, so starting with Houses of the Lost, you get rules about sandbox gaming and descriptions of sandbox gaming, which I said a little bit earlier is like this loose, player-driven, players do whatever they want, GM responds to that with some kind of, what does the world do in response, and what kind of trouble do they get into? It's also, but that's pretty demanding on a game master. They don't have a scripted adventure. They don't have a map with things already in place. It's sort of like players move off in one direction, and the game master on the fly has to figure out what are they going to encounter, right? So there's a lot of inventing on the fly. Books like this give tools to the game master to help them invent those things. It's sort of best practices for sandbox game mastering listed here, which is well worth the read. I won't get into it right now, but I recommend it to you. How to create and use sites. So if you're going to encounter a random location, how do you do that, right? What's there? How does it work? Or how do you sort of invent loosely a bunch of different locations that they might run into and then employ them narratively as they go? So stocking up the campaign folder, first play session, between sessions. There's work to do between sessions. So after you finish playing with your characters, with your players, they all go home and you think like, all right, where are they in the world? What might they encounter next? What do I need to build out based on what we've done in order to make sure there's an adventure for next week, right? So random tables is kind of the way to do that. And he gives you a series of random tables for different kinds of sites. A court site is sort of like something run by the government, and there's 6 different types. So you can roll a 6-sided die and say, oh, it's going to be a business. And the people of importance, there'll be 2 people of importance with these kind of roles. What kind of conflicts are there? This is really important. To have a location is just to have a space, and if you populate it with interesting details about the back history of the world, then there'll be some environmental storytelling to be done there. But if there's no conflict, then there's kind of no adventure to be had, right? So here's roll a 10-sided die and find out that there's going to be a conflict based on folly. One of the people is making a terrible hash of their duties and will not give it up. So there's, maybe the boss of this shop is totally running the business into the ground and all of his employees are really concerned and there's this argument taking place and maybe they try to involve the adventuring party in that dispute, right? In some way or another, all these are like ways to create conflicts which then become plot hooks that players can get involved in and then go on quests, right? So different kinds of courts. If it's a business, what kind of business is it? If it's an extended family, what kind? So basically there's just all these random tables where you don't have to do too much thinking. You can just sort of roll some dice and get, well, it's a family business with this many employees and this kind of conflict in this sort of space with this kind of dealings and relationships with other people. And you fill in the connections and blanks for yourself, and then you've got material for the next session pretty easily, right? And there's different kinds of sites. It's not just government sites, it's Borderlands sites and other kinds. Lots of different random tables to generate material on the fly and or between sessions so that the sandbox campaign just keeps going and going and going. No clear end, no clear goal. It's just, story after story after story. Okay, that is all. We'll come back to this again. We'll come back to this and Masks of Nyarlathotep in a different video about if you're going to start representing history and cultures, how can you do so without kind of making mistakes, with being culturally sensitive while you do it, right? So that's a separate issue and a separate video, and I think it's an important one, so check that out when it pops up. We've reached the end of what we're going to talk about now, which is just here's some different kinds of things you need to start building your world out into a playable space. You've got a world you want to talk about. You got some details you want to put in that world. Now what you do is pick a set of core rules, which is kind of a big project. If you don't know much about those, another video is coming to tell you about a couple that you can hack. Pick a set of core rules and then either write an adventure module for it. So you have kind of a linear scripted adventure that players can go on, which I recommend as kind of a first step. Or start building out a source book, or I said or start building out a source book so that you can facilitate more sandbox style play. So linear adventures with all the details needed to fulfill them, or a whole world and tools for the GM to invent stuff on the fly and keep track of what's happening in the world on the fly. My recommendation for the next assignment would be that you start with the smallest possible adventure module. Don't worry about systems right now. We'll get to that in a later video. You've got some environmental storytelling details stuff. You've got some history that you want to show up in a location. Make like one small, medium-sized location, one town of a few people, or a ruin somewhere, or a shipyard or something, and populate that space with environmental details and give us a clear plot hook, clear obstacles, and then a goal so that we know when the adventure is over and the players have won. Keep it small at first, I think. And in fact, dang it, we should look at this real quick. 1-page dungeon. No. There we go. So dungeoncontest.com, home of the one-page dungeon contest. Go check this out. Every year, I think, they run this contest where everybody tries to create a dungeon or an adventure location that just takes place, that only takes up one page. So all of your description, your map and your descriptions and everything all have to be scrunched into one page. This is a good assignment to start with. Are they going to show us examples? Here's the contact submission guide. Oh, let's look at 2014. You can buy sort of collections of their. Click for gallery. Here we go. Boop. So anyway, you can explore the site and you can see examples of here we go. Dungeons that were built on one page. So there's usually, not always, but there's usually some kind of map and then descriptions of locations on the map, so that players, when they start, encountering this, they can have an adventure. Start with something like this. Start with like a one-page adventure. It's a small map, a few discrete locations, brief descriptions of what players might encounter there. Don't worry about stats or stuff right now. Later you can add those back in if you develop a system that's sort of numbers heavy. But just give us the kinds of things they'll encounter, what the goal is, why players are there, what the plot hook is, what obstacles they'll encounter, and then what the goal is, so that they know they've sort of won this location. Okay, and see if you can fit it on a page or two, and keep it brief. This is a good sort of starting piece, and then you can build up into bigger things, including if you write a bunch of these, then you can sort of put them all in the same world, and then you've got a much larger adventure and a much larger world for players to encounter. Okay, that's all the talking for me right now. I hope that gives you a good idea of what you need to do to take your world and start implementing it in a playable space. We'll give you some future videos about how to do that in a little bit more detail. But for right now, start making small adventures. Okay? All right, that's it for this time. Thanks for watching. See you next time.